Okay, so எத்தனை பேருக்கு இங்க இருக்கவங்கள வந்து something related to airplane you want to learn or you want to go into that career? யாருக்குமே அந்த இண்டஸ்ட்ரியை பத்தி தெரியுமா? Okay, sit down guys, sit down, please close the door, please don't stand, sit down, okay? Let's start, okay? உனக்கு என்ன பண்ண ஆசை? Aerospace engineering. Okay, வேற யாருக்கு என்ன? Okay, so எத்தனை பேர் இங்க இருக்கவங்க எல்லாம் ஃளைட்ல போயிருக்கீங்க? Okay, so ஒரு 10 இயர்ஸ்க்கு முன்னால வந்து ஒரு ஃளைட் வந்து ஹட்சன் ரிவர்ல இருந்துச்சு இல்லையா? யாரெல்லாம் அதை பத்தி படிச்சிருக்கீங்க? Okay, சரி, what do you know about that? Okay, close, yes. Okay, Vera. Okay, so 2009 I think 2009 வந்து நியூயார்க்ல இருந்து லகாடி ஏர்போர்ட் வந்து டேக் ஆஃப் ஆன ஃளைட் வந்து லைக் ரெண்டு பேர்ட்ஸ் வந்து ஹிட் ஆகி ரெண்டு இன்ஜினும் every aircraft has two engines, right? So ரெண்டு இன்ஜினும் வந்து ஒரே டைம்ல வந்து ஸ்பாயில் ஆயிடுச்சு. So flight வந்து திரும்ப pull back to any nearest airport, there was no possibility. So அப்பா வந்து ஒரு பைலட்டோட மைண்ட் செட் எப்படி இருக்கும்? Okay, so you have 150 passengers இருந்தாங்க அந்த flightல. Okay, but he saved it, right? So then you know how intense, how reactive they need to be in the moment இல்லையா? So இன்னைக்கு வந்து நம்ம கிட்ட வந்து நம்ம கூட வந்து பைலட் ஸ்கூல்ல இருந்து he's going to be a future pilot. Okay, இவர் வந்து so he is going to talk about if any one of you are interested into like aviation, not necessarily a pilot. There's so many other things you can do by learning aviation, right? So we have welcome Steve Livingston. Okay, so Steve Livingston now he's going to talk about what is like if someone in here who wants to go into, many of you may not know anything about aviation. Maybe it's like something about aviation, not necessarily. It's not like trying to tell you, but there is another career you can also look at it, not necessarily focus on it. Normally, like Indian parents always say IT, medical, and engineering, right? So something you can do on here also in aviation. So idea is to make Steve talk about how he is getting closer to become a pilot. Okay? All right, Steve. Let him give some slides for you guys, then you can hold on to the question at the end so you can ask questions. Go ahead.
Okay, so like you said, my name's Steve and I'm in flight school right now. So the way I get into flight school, he asked you guys if you all been on plane before. I think most of you raised your hand, so I'm guessing you went to India, right, or something like that. So that's basically how it is for me. So when I was a kid, right, every maybe 2 years, my parents would take to India. And one of my favorite parts was the travel, the aviation, the plane, the airport, everything about it. It was specifically the plane. I wanted to know what's in the cockpit, how does it work, why does it do that. And so even from before I can remember, from when I was a kid, I'm interested in anything aviation. So you don't even have to take this as like necessarily a career presentation. You can even there's a lot of people that are very, very interested in aviation, even just as a hobby. So you can, if you want, you can even consider it like something like that, because there's this thing in the aviation, they call it the industry, they call it the aviation bug. The reason why it's almost like an infection. So like normally I think maybe you guys are a few years off, but when you start thinking about where to go for college or for what do you want to do for your career, things like that, you'll probably think of maybe a few options, right? Like liberal arts or sciences or something like that. But for the people that go into aviation, it's like a bug that the only thing they can think about is aviation, or whether it's flying or if it's designing like engineering or if it's mechanical or something, and they that's all they can think about and they never forget. So when you want to be in aviation, you absolutely know. So if any of you if you have that kind of interest, right, it doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, you have to be a career. You can even choose it as like some kind of hobby or things like that, because there's a lot of people that they fly just for recreation, for fun. Like I have a close friend who he's really, really interested in planes, but he's not really he doesn't want to be a pilot, so he went down to school for maintenance and things like that, you know, working on aircraft. And you know, I've met two people who I used to work at a Home Depot as a cashier part-time, and you know, I met two guys there who they're maybe in their 30s, and you know, unfortunately for them, they couldn't go into the industry, but even still to this day, they're you know, they still think about aviation, and they wish they had done it, they wish they'd done something in it. So it's a you know, it's a bug, it's an infectious desire to get into aviation. So you know, if you have that, you can definitely consider not necessarily a full career, but you can consider, you know, getting a pilot license maybe, or you know, joining an aircraft club and things like that. So now, so I'll just talk briefly about, you know, my what I do, right? So what I'm doing, I'm planning on becoming a full-time pilot, you know, hopefully in the future. So this sort of 1 through 6 is kind of the basic steps that every pilot will have to go. And you know, if you notice something, there's no degree out there, that's the case. You actually do not need to necessarily go to college to be a pilot. It's more you go to what's called a flight school. Now there are colleges that have flight schools in them, but the way it kind of works, you have to think of it like you have the college and then the flight school is inside of it. The reason why is because aviation, all of these licenses there, or certificates as they're technically supposed to be called, all of these licenses are managed by the government. So there's no school that can give you a license. So you know how you think of like when you guys graduate high school, you'll get some kind of diploma, but the school will give you the diploma. Or if you graduate college, you'll get a diploma from them, right? Or you'll get a degree in bachelor's, whatever. But everything from for the pilot's perspective is all given by the government. So the only thing schools do is they teach you how to get that license. So the first one, this is where the recreation comes in. It's private pilot. So I have this one. You know, everyone that becomes a pilot will get this one. It's basically you can fly just one single engine aircraft with passengers, or obviously by yourself. That's all it is. You know, and that's what a lot of hobby people they get. Is because, you know, let's say aviation is a very, you know, it's an expensive hobby to dedicate and go to school and fully get everything, you know, for a career. So a lot of people will just get the private pilot license, which means that, you know, they can fly, you know, your friends, or you can fly for a hobby, you can fly to, you know, northern Michigan, or fly across the country even if you want. So that's basically a very basic pilot license. Then you have an instrument license. So basically what that is when you have a private pilot license, you can't fly in clouds, right? You can't fly in any type of condition where you can't see outside of the window. So what instrument teaches you is to fly just using your instrument. So during that training, they'll give you these special glasses where you put it on and like the top half of it is completely opaque and you can only see the panel in front of you, you know, all your instruments, right? So you have things that tell you how high you are, what direction you're flying, where you are, things like that. So you have to fly the flight as if you're flying inside of a cloud and you can't see anything. Then you have commercial. This is what I have right up there. That's what that picture is. That's about me getting my commercial license. That essentially lets you fly for hire. So, you know, if you're thinking of it as a career, you definitely at least go up to commercial. This one, it's basically the same thing as a private pilot license, but it's a bit more, you know, in depth and more. You need more knowledge and more knowledge of maneuvers and things, because if you're flying, you know, and someone is hiring you to fly, you need to have some more standards, right, than just your basic private pilot. So then, this is what I'm currently doing right now. This is the course I'm taking to become a flight instructor, a certified flight instructor. So that's simply, you know, just teaching students like how to, you know, teaching them how to fly, obviously in the plane, but also having some ground knowledge, you know, like teaching them aerodynamic basics and things like that. So then multi-engine, right, pretty simple. Instead of now, you go from flying here from private pilot with one engine to flying something more like this, a multi-engine aircraft. But just because you have that license doesn't mean you can just go and fly like, you know, those big aircraft you see like the 737, right, or something like that. For those you need, I won't go into too much detail, but you need something called a type rating. But basically the point is, you know, you need special training for those large aircraft. With this type of license, you can fly stuff like this. This is an aircraft we have at my school. It's called the Beechcraft Duchess. Just, it's smaller, but, 2 engines and what, I think like maybe 5 people capacity. So you can fly things like that. Multi-engine though, recreation, that's a pretty big commitment if you're just flying for hobby. So multi-engine will mostly be people who are going for a career. And then finally you have your ATP. This one's a little bit like lots of complex reasons why you get this, but essentially, right, it just allows you to fly for say someone like Delta or something like, Spirit or JetBlue, something like that. So what I was saying before, where it's all government regulated, right? The schools, what they do is they'll teach you, like, according to this set of standards, they'll teach you what you need, the specific things the government wants you to know for getting any of these licenses. And then what you do is you go and you take what's called a check ride. So it's a check ride is an examination from an instructor that's hired by the FAA, or the Federal Aviation Administration, so the government basically. The government worker will come and he'll evaluate your skills based off of, any of these licenses. So once you pass that test, then you're given the license from the government. So now going back to what I was saying about, college and things like that. So there's 2 ways, and I'll kind of keep this simple as I can with flight schools. So that picture, that's the flight school that I go to. So it's not necessarily college based. So the thing is with licenses, right? You could have a degree in aviation sciences. Aviation sciences is kind of like the pilot degree. You could have that degree, but if you don't have any of those licenses from before, right, you can't fly. So even if you have the degree and you have all this knowledge of aerodynamics and things like that, if you don't have any of those licenses I mentioned, you can't apply for anywhere. So that's the reason why flight schools are kind of separate from the actual college itself. The college will give you sort of the ground knowledge, they'll teach you aerodynamics and the instrument systems and blah, 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 but you'll actually get the knowledge of how to fly practically from the flight school. So there's 2 types of flight schools. You'll see, if you do look into becoming a pilot, you'll see a lot of this, Part 61, Part 141. Basically, simply put, what that means, the part is, it's a part of a regulation. There's this thing called the FAR, the Federal Aviation Regulations. So there's a part of it that's Part 61 that talks about 61 schools, and then part of it that talks about 141 schools. So in general, you'll hear a lot of back and forth as to what's better, what's not better, this is better, blah, blah, blah. So usually, from a college perspective, all colleges that have a flight school in them, so for example, what I used to do is I used to go to Western Michigan for my flight schooling. And they have a big aviation program, but the problem was when I went, they were not ready for the influx of students that were coming in. So they told all the freshmen, you won't be flying your first year. I should have seen that as a huge red flag, but I didn't understand fully about the industry yet, so I ended up going there for a little bit, but then COVID hit again, so then that even more, completely destroyed the whole program. So I decided to leave, and I went to this new flight school, DCT Aviation. So but it's under Part 141, which is, a lot of people in the older days, they'll say, oh, you have to do 141, but it's kind of changing nowadays, the difference between them. So if you see the pros here, right, 61 is cost effective. So what does that mean? Well, when you're in 61, Part 61, you will pay for each individual lesson as you take it. Before you take the lesson, or after you finish it, right, you'll pay for the 2-hour lesson course. But with 141, it's like college, right? You will pay upfront everything. The problem with that is it's not always cost effective. They might, overinflate their charge and say, okay, you have to pay this much, that much, blah, blah, blah. It's not always good. It's better to pay individually. So another pro, Part 61 type school is more personalized, right? They're usually smaller, and they have more. You'll work one-on-one with your instructor a lot more, and you can easily talk to your instructor as well. And the good thing about that is, like, when you're at a big college, right, they might have a lot of instructors that are also students. So now you have to deal with an instructor who's also a student at the college, and if you can actually get into contact with them, can you actually learn anything from them, things like that. Also 61, right, is at your pace. So every lesson, like I said, is individual. You pay it, so it's way when you're ready, you progress. The next one, right, is experienced instructors. Like I said, I was mentioning colleges, 141 type schools will have like more students that are also instructors, but you're more likely to get like long time, like 10 years, 15-year instructors that can give you a lot of good information at the 61 school. So cons, like wider range of quality. What does that mean? Well, the thing with 61 schools is it's kind of like these are what maybe when you think of flight school, the 61 is kind of what most people kind of think of. So it's like a school that runs just out of an airport. 141 is more broad range. So those are the ones that are out of an actual college, like Western, like I said, I went to before. There's like one in Florida called like Embry-Riddle, big aeronautical university. That's usually what 141 is. But the problem you can get with 61 if you don't do research is like there's some really bad schools that are part of the 61 group. Like you can have some that especially like that some that are out in the country, right? They have instructors that they don't really care. The planes are really old, or they're going to fall apart, and could be dangerous. And there's even some cases of like scams. So the school will say, okay, hey, pay $40,000 and we'll finish your training, and then they'll suddenly close and disappear, but you won't get your money back. So there are things like that can happen with 61. So you have to do a lot of research when you're looking into a school versus when you're looking at colleges, right? It's pretty easy. You can get a good grasp of a college is good for you or not good for you based on what people say about it. And then fewer resources, basically, obviously 141 schools usually have lots of money. So like when I was at Western, they had the whole fleet of planes they were training was like $500,000 each for every plane. So really, really, really nice. But potentially, right, if you don't have that good of a school, you can kind of get some rusty, raggedy type planes and things that you're working with. So 141, basically the difference, and I'll try to keep it simple. Difference between the two. 141 is basically like what they say is, we tell you what to do and you do it exactly as we tell you. So that's why I have it under pro, but it could be a con or structured course for 141. So basically they have like a deadline of you have to be good at this stuff at this deadline. 61 is more like you do what you need to do. So at your pace, and when you're ready, you finish it. So another pro 141, right? Potentially more resources. Like I said, potentially it varies here and there depending on if the college invests into their program or not. So there's a lot of resources that you have to research that you have to do and look into these schools. So now our requirements. So that's kind of a big one. So for me, like if I want to go and fly for like Delta, right, or something like that, I have to gain 1,500 hours of just flight time. So that means I have to fly, in any situation, I need at least 1,500 hours. 141, because they have, the government has sort of looked at it and they said, oh, well, 141, you're better equipped, right? You have better schooling, technically. They reduce some of those hour requirements. So for them, they might need 1,300 or even 1,000 hours only they might need. Or like, for example, to get, when I talked about that private pilot license, normally students will need at minimum 40 hours to get the license, but with 141, they reduce it to 35. There's no one that does it in 40 hours, let alone 35, but it's just the requirement's there. So now for the cons, right, with 141, you can get trapped into what's called an academy. You might, if you look into becoming a pilot, you'll hear about a lot of pilot academies. So what they advertise is they say, okay, you can become a private pilot to getting ready for the airline in 8 months. The problem with that is, right, when you become a pilot, when you go into the aviation career, it's not like what you're doing in school right now, where you have a test coming up and you study for the test and then you memorize everything on the test and then you take the test and then you forget everything a week later, right? You have to, with the pilot career, right, everything that you learn, you have to actually apply right, immediately right there. So if I learn, on the ground, pull back on the stick and the nose will go up, I can learn it as much as I want on the ground, but I have to actually do it, right, in the plane. or if I learn how to turn the plane on, right, I can memorize it as much as I want, and I could write, even if they gave me an exam and they told me, okay, here, write down the steps, I can do that, but I have to apply that, right? So the problem with 141 and the fact that it's so structured, right, with colleges and things, right, they have like a 4-year course and they have semesters, is they don't really give you time to actually internalize and learn all this stuff. So, you know, you need a lot of hours to build up the practical skill of flight, right? You're learning a whole new skill. Even driving, right? It's much more simpler, but you know, in a few years you guys will probably learn how to drive. And you know, you'll still need like 40 hours or something of driving before you can actually go and get a driver's license. So similar thing, right? You get this kind of rushed feeling of, okay, we just need to pump these pilots out as quick as we can. So here, okay, you're okay, you're just barely there reaching it, okay, go on to the next stuff. So what happens is you get a lot of students that come out of the 141 world and they have this, like, they have book knowledge, but they can't actually fly the plane, which is kind of a big problem. Another thing, right, is over-teaching. That's what I kind of mean about the book knowledge. So they'll learn a lot of things, right? Maybe they're good at you know, writing stuff down in exams, but they lack the practical skill of flying. And then finally, you know, costly. It can be quite expensive. Colleges, I remember just back in 2019 at Western, not including tuition, not including boarding at Western, just the flight cost was like $60,000 just for, you know, beginning to end of their course. And then you have to add on top of that, right, the tuition for the school, and yeah, it can get kind of crazy. Nowadays, I don't know, it's probably, I think it's $80,000 just for school. So lots and lots and lots of money. So it can be a big investment, and you have to be really careful about getting into a school. Okay, so
you can
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like just real quick, you know, these are just basic careers for pilot. So like they said, you know, CFI, that's just instructor. Some people stay instructor, you know, all they want. Some people they'll, you know, do skydiving pilots, cargo pilots, regional, airline like Delta, or you know, corporate pilot, charter pilot. There's a lot of opportunities just in the pilot range. It's not just like, oh, you have to go fly for Delta, or you have to go fly around the world, and things like that. So now, you know, if you guys have any questions, you can go ahead.
Which part did you do?
Oh yeah. Sorry, I should have said that. So I started 141 and now 61 is what I'm in. Any other questions?
So how many hours have you done?
So for me right now, I'm about at 300 hours.
So if you were to, like, let's say you wanted to join like the Air Force, would it be the same thing? Or would it be like,
Oh yeah, so yeah, a lot of people used to do the Air Force. That's how a lot of older pilots are nowadays. It's kind of switching because, you know, but the Air Force, it's relatively the same. You'll still get the exact same licenses because, like I said, it's all government oriented. So no matter what school you go to, right, you're learning essentially what the government wants you to learn to be a pilot. So the same thing with the military.
yeah, pretty good. So like let's say at my age you flew a plane, right? You have 5 hours from there, okay? Does that continue on when you get to college, or do you have to do it again in college with the other 15 hours?
Oh, so you're just saying like if you fly, so yeah, those hours you get what's called a logbook. So you log everything, every
so
hour you
my
fly.
logic, I have 15 hours, right? If that, does that go into college? Or
What do you mean like inter college? Like can
can
you
use
count
that
it?
when
You can use it, but so let's say it's okay. Let's say you go to flight school before college. When you go into college, chances are if you didn't get the private license, most likely they'll try and redo and teach, but your hours will count.
Okay,
But they'll redo your training because they want to do it the way that they have their school set up and things like that.
What part do you prefer?
What's that?
What part do you prefer?
So, well, that's a kind of interesting one because, like I said, there's different schools have different advantages for each part. So, like, my school is 61, but it's kind of like they've done a good job of combining the benefits of 141 and teaching you a lot of book knowledge with the advantages of 61. So I'll say, if you ask most people, they'll probably say 61 is better because it gives you more time to really get to know and learn, but that doesn't mean that all 141 is bad. There's 141s that are better than 61, and there's 61 that's better than 141. It's just all, you know, research and where you are, what schools are next to you, and things like that.
Any other questions? So how many of you want to be a pilot or in aviation? Anybody's thinking? No? Why? Because it's the cost is so high, you mentioned? Number of hours you need. Okay. How many of you think like being a pilot is a cool thing or it's a intense? Cool. Why do you think cool?
Because there's a lot of
Okay, let's ask Steve. I have a question. So, what's a challenging thing so far in your pilot school?
Challenging, I'd say it's well, like here's the thing, right? When you learn, like I said before, the aviation bug, right? Because you're so obsessed with flying, a lot of it is just really fun, right? Because every lesson, right? Imagine like instead of sitting in a class, right, and listening to a professor talk to you, imagine you get to go in and you get to fly, right? That's incredibly fun. So in challenges, there's not too much as long as you're really interested in the field. But I'd say there are certain things, or one that's really challenging is the check ride. So that's where the examiner comes and he examines you, because it's not like a written exam. He'll come and at minimum of 2 hours, right? 1 hour you'll do an oral examination. So he'll just ask you questions about everything that related to that license, and you have to answer. And it's pass or fail, right? There's no grade. Either he says, okay, I think you can be a pilot and you can do it, or he'll just fail you. And so you have to do an oral examination there, and then you have to do another at minimum hour of flight, right? Where you fly and you show him maneuvers for that license, and you show him if you can land properly, certain types of landings, how do you react in an emergency, things like that. And some of them, right, I'm the course I'm in, the CFI, the instructor course, they're telling me the check ride for that might take, sometimes it can take 4 to 8 hours. So, you know, that's stuff that's really challenging, is the actual examination, which makes sense because, you know, when you're flying, right, you have people's lives are in your hands, right? So it's really important that you know how to do what you're doing. Yeah.
how long did it
So the courses, it kind of depends. So it can take anywhere from like 4 months to potentially 8 months. Like I said, it really depends on how long it takes to get hours, because there's lots of hour requirements.
So more, what he's saying is more than the course itself, you need to fly 1,500 hours to become a commercial pilot, right?
Yeah.
So the getting that 1,500 hours, you need to pay for that each hour, because you are going to be learning, right?
So technically, you don't have to pay for the hours, but if you find a job, right, like 1,500 hours is airline, big airline, Delta, things like that. But if you find a job, right, instructor, like what I'm doing, instructor, when I instruct students, right, I'll be paid for that. That's my job. Then I can build hours through that also. Yeah.
Yeah, let's take things then. Go on, go on. No, go on.
So, did your parents affect
That's a tough question. At first, no, not really. You know, because like, you know, it's in Indian, it's not a common thing, right? But you know, they weren't too like, you know, you have to do this. Thankfully, you know, I pled my case, and you know, now it's okay now. So yeah. But at first, yeah, it's a little difficult.
If you fail the oral part of it, do they still take you to the flag?
Nope, you have to, yeah.
If you fail any test, do you have to like start again?
So, if you fail the oral examination, what they'll do is they'll stop, and then you redo it, the whole thing, pretty much. Yeah. With the flying, if you fail the flying, you only have to retake what you failed. So that's the nice part of that.
So if you want to be like in like the aviation, like the
No. So that's a completely different type of training. What's that? So hours, most people, right, when they train, that counts as hours. So when you actually go and do the course and you go for your instructor 2 hours, that counts as total hours. But the way people really get hours is the one slide I had a commercial license. That allows you to earn money to fly. So a lot of people, they'll get a job. Let's say, have you ever seen those planes that tow the big banners in the sky? Right, that's a job you can work to build hours. Most people, they become an instructor because, if you have 8 or 9 students, right, that's 2-hour lessons for each student, you can build up a lot of hours by doing that.
So we can take 2 more questions if time checks. Anybody have any more questions?
One thing
Parents,
convey,
go ahead, ask.
convey the students who is interested in this aviation or related to aircraft. Boeing has a very big facility in Seattle. Whoever visits over there, like it's a commercial, anyone can go there and just they can see
Tour.
They can take a tour like Boeing 787 or 777, whatever it is. Yeah, so that is
Good. Anybody else has question? No? Okay, alright, thanks everybody. Let's give a good